That went Supertramp. Here comes Jeremy Gielen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, here in Silicon Valley at 11th Cloud Expo. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're following our Day 3 keynote out there on the World Wide Web via SYS-CON TV. So, halfway through Cloud Expo, I make it, something like that. Who went to the Temptations last night? Wow, that means that the other people who went to the Temptations last night drank too much. But they will come in the course of this because there's coffee out back. So, let us give a huge morning welcome round of applause to the CTO and EVP of Progress Software, who's going to tell us about his particular take on cloud apps, which is all to do with this some, which I believe it should be in italics, John, some assembly required. Give it up, please, for Dr. John Bates.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and nice to see you all here. I'm sure many others were out also, as well as the Temptations, either drowning their sorrows after the election or celebrating. So I hope you got the result you wanted. I'm going to be talking today about applications and application development and deployment environments, and what are the emerging requirements that we're learning about and in the form of 10 imperatives that we've learned about from our partners and customers. And we're going to discuss those, but then really talk about the overarching message of this, which is almost everything you need to build your application exists out there in the cloud. It's just a question of assembling it. So what's my data points for talking about all this? Well, Progress, we have a very rich community of partners, and we have 1,500 application partners who build their applications on our application development and deployment environment. And in turn, they sell those applications to 47,000 businesses around the world. And there's all sorts of interesting end users which we learn about. So if you buy a sub at Subway, then you pay at the point of sale. The applications running there are delivered on Progress systems by a company, a partner called Franchise Technologies. And there's examples like that all around the world. If you lose a Lego brick, or you don't have a Lego brick missing and you phone up Lego, the person in the call center is typing on a system from Wilkie Global, another Progress partner, entering your information. You know, whether you're distributing Pepsi in Russia or mining systems in Australia, there's all sorts of interesting communities you can talk to about the way they see requirements emerging, as well as a whole load of direct end customers as well. So I spent a lot of my time talking to those guys. And the one thing that I learn when I talk to them is that the very nature of what constitutes a business application has and is fundamentally changing. It's moving from the old world in which you built everything from scratch, a transaction processing application, to a world in which you want to be able to connect to the world out there, to be able to compose and assemble components. And you want to be really critical around time to market and time to value of getting stuff out there and connecting to all these services. So we've identified 10 imperatives of next generation application development and deployment. So these are the requirements that we're looking at that we need to follow, and I'll be interested in your feedback on this. Of course, there are probably more than 10, but I've picked 10 as a matter of discussion, and then let's talk about how we might go about enabling those imperatives. The key point here is if you look at any one of them, you go, yeah, duh, yeah, of course. But just like that. But it's really about the way they're converging, because you need more than one or two of them. The application requirements are converging these imperatives. So we'll look at that as we go through. So the first one really is a duh, because of course this is Cloud Expo, and obviously the first one's going to be that you need to build your apps for cloud first, with cloud in mind. And what do we mean by that? Well, if you build your apps designed for the cloud on a platform that's enabled to do that, then they should run fine on premise. And what are the key features there? Well, as it won't surprise you to know, that obviously means elasticity and multi-tenancy built in to the platform, And that's something we've done a lot of work in our application development and deployment platforms, building in things like multi-tenancy and core into the database. But whatever platform you're using, building cloud first as a premise. And I've really been interested in a lot of the speakers who've talked about cloud. Well, you know, it's a lot. There's some people. It's talking about it in hype and just using that name. So I thought I'd give you an interesting story about a real cloud example with a real one of our partners that shows you just how the elasticity and capability of cloud really helped out their end customer. This is a story about when peanut butter goes bad. So one of our partners, Wilkie Global, they provide customer management solutions that you might use in a call center to keep track of when your customers call you up and say, you know, I've got this issue, or I'd like to thank you, or you know, some bit's missing, or something like that. And their systems keep track of this. And they built their system on the Progress platform to run in the cloud, to be elastic, and to be multi-tenant. And one of their customers is a large food company whose name I'm not allowed to mention. But you might have remembered that there was a large peanut butter recall a few years back where peanut butter got infected with E. coli, and there was, you know, hundreds of thousands of jars distributed. And of course that leads to lots of mums wanting to call up when you have a product recall and say, you know, is little Johnny going to be all right? Is little Johnny going to live? And of course, the food company very much want to be able to handle that. Now, if you think about the application they're using, it's web-based, it's back-ended in the cloud. They have the opportunity to handle that going from dozens of call center staff to hundreds or even thousands at the flick of a button. Wilkie Global were able to provision them, and they could even have people working from home, extra call center staff to handle this massive product recall. So the equation peanut butter plus E. coli equals angry customers. You add in another element in there, which is peanut butter plus E. coli plus cloud equals delighted customers. Little Johnny's going to live. I managed to talk to somebody. Isn't that wonderful? So there you go. The cloud saved little Johnny, and that's wonderful. But that's a real great example of elasticity and the way you need to turn it on. Those of you who've worked with enterprise customers on-premise know that provisioning a PC and getting the software on it can take weeks. This is something you can do overnight. It's very powerful. So nice little story. The second imperative, mobile first. One thing I ask you to remember is it's the convergence here. Yeah, there's lots of people doing cloud platforms and lots of people doing mobile platforms, but these need to come together. These need to come together, and mobile needs to be able to scale to whatever device you're using. The front end of the application, you might have user interface design tools as well, scale down to your iPhone, your iPad, your Android. And of course, mobile devices are out shipping PCs 2-to-1. Now, what's an interesting example of the way that's converging with cloud? If you look at a partner like Bluebird Auto Rental that we work with, if you rent a car from Thrifty, Dollar, or Budget, the software that they're using comes from Bluebird Auto Rental. They're wanting to move in this direction. They're wanting to have apps that offer the kind of service when you need a taxi or a limo, there are apps out there that can bring them to you. They want to do that with rental cars. So you're on your iPhone, you realize that there's an opportunity to go to a meeting in 2 hours. You don't want to call a cab. You want to be in control of your life. You want to get a rental car, but you want it to come to you. So you enter your details on your iPhone, for example, click the contract. The front end's on your mobile device, the back end's in the cloud, the location and the contract go into the cloud, and the car comes to you. Now that's a great example of the convergence of mobile and cloud. So this is the way that things need to converge. Now the third imperative, building on that, is location and context awareness. Location is obviously something that's now much more able to be got on the mobile devices. How can you use that in applications? How can applications personalize and change the content based on what you're doing and where you are? And we saw that example in the rental car, but let's scale that up to a massive level. Worked around the world, done a lot of work in this area with retailers, banks, telcos, And they have massive numbers of customers, and they want to offer things in a location-aware way. And I'm seeing this as a requirement that's emerging in all applications. Let's have a look at an example. If I pick a customer, we have, for example, one in Turkey called Turkcell, which is the biggest mobile carrier in Turkey. They have 35 million customers, and what they're doing is pushing offers to those customers in real time. So if you're walking past a shoe store, you like designer shoes, you might get placed an offer. You know, if we look at the example in a US context, let's say Home Depot might want to say, tell me if anybody comes within range of one of my stores, but today my special offer is in gardening tools, so I'm only interested in people who are interested in gardening. Now their loyalty app might be an iPhone or Android app, so you might be able to get their location. You're feeding that in your back end in the cloud, and when they come within range, you can push them that offer. Now let's take it one step further, composing other services into this. Rather than them going into the store, they might want to buy the special offer of the day, the weed whacker of their dreams that's 50% off. They can buy it with Google Wallet and have it shipped to them, or they can go and pick it up later. So this is the kind of concept of making apps location aware and then composing other things in response to changes in location and context. So imperative 4, being socially connected. Combined with cloud mobile location awareness, plugging into social networks is something that seems very important to our customers and partners. 80% of mobile apps now are connected to social networks, and that can be anything from being able to see and place messages on Twitter, Facebook. It can also be actually using those as a collaboration mechanism, or taking those feeds in and doing real-time sentiment analysis based on your company or your product. So analytics on social media, but it requires tapping into those networks. I'll come back to that in a minute to give you an example, but I'm going to talk quickly about imperative 5, the need for global scale. We talked a moment ago about that application, the location-aware application from Turkcell. 35 million customers being tracked in real time. So every time one of them moves, you're getting a location update, which you have to correlate against where your hot zones are. That requires a whole new type of analytics, which I'll talk about in a bit more in a moment. But take that to the next level. We've already talked about location awareness. We've already talked about social media. What about that on a global scale? And what's the future going to look like? What are our customers anticipating in this area? Well, imagine the world that's coming within the next couple of years. You are all going to be wearing Google glasses. I'm sure you've all heard about this device. You put on a pair of glasses, and rather than looking on your cell phone to get information, it's going to overlay it in an augmented reality way over your eyes. So you're going to be able to see information overlaid. But what's that going to actually enable us to do? Well, it's going to enable us a whole new range of applications, but they have radical implications to our application development deployment requirements in the cloud. So you're going to be able to walk around a city. When you look at a shop or a store, you'll see maybe offers that are personalized to you in that store. You look at a coffee shop, you'll see, are your friends in that coffee shop? You know, Jamie Merritt's in the coffee shop. Oh, I better avoid that then. You're popular, Jamie. You look at a house, you happen to be looking for a house, the system knows that, it shows you houses that are relevant and what they cost. The world is going to change. Think about the implications that has for the application development deployment environment to scale from that kind of Turkcell type app to potentially hundreds of millions or billions. Every time somebody moves, you have to figure out what's there, what's relevant to them. Is there somebody else who's within range that's of interest? These whole apps are going to go with you. The only way these can be delivered is by mobile. The only way the back ends of those apps can work is in the cloud. This is going to be a completely new model. So moving on to imperative 6, big data in motion. Now, one of the themes of this conference, of course, as well as cloud, is big data. But I'm going to take it to another step, to big data in motion. There's according to IDC anyway, 2.7 zettabytes of data in the world this year. A zettabyte is 2 to the power 70 bytes. That's enough to fill 250 unique newspapers every day for everybody on the planet. But supposedly, by 2015, that's going to 8 zettabytes. Now, that's not just going to arrive in one batch. It's streaming at us all the time. And many applications see the need, I hear, in order to respond to patterns in that data, not after you've collected it, in which some applications are great if you collect them in a big Hadoop and crunch them, but some need to respond to patterns as that data is actually streaming. So that's big data in motion. I'll come to an example of that in a moment, but big data in motion, you want to find the opportunities and threats of things of interest to the business as the data streams past. One of the things you want to do is imperative 7. You want to be able to spot trends, things that are trending and emerging, and act on them before they get critical or while you've got the chance. That could be opportunities and threats that are about to happen. And I'll give you an example in a minute. So it's not being reactive, it's not being rear view mirror, it's moving to be proactive and even predictive in real time. And this is the kind of requirements that we're seeing emerging. I'll give you an example that bring together big data in motion and predictive and proactive applications. I do a lot of work with capital markets customers in the trading space, big banks, hedge funds and so on. Anybody who's followed the news has got to have seen that the markets have been in turmoil since 2008 with Lehman's and Bear Stearns going down. But in the last few years, we've seen a lot of high-profile cases of big trading problems. In 2010, on the 6th of May, you saw the flash crash. The flash crash was when the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 1,000 points and then recovered almost immediately. Now, that could normally happen over the course of weeks. This happened in under 30 minutes. Never seen before. And it took 6 months to investigate this and to find out what happened. It turned out it was somebody had misparameterized one trading algorithm that spooked the market, which was already nervous, and caused that plunge, and then the market kind of recovered. Now, it might not have recovered, but it did. So that's one thing that's going on. Combined with that, you probably saw last year, UBS had a rogue trader who was hiding trades with his knowledge of his back office knowledge. He was hiding the fact that he'd taken these very big trading positions, and it lost UBS $6 billion. Now, shouldn't they have detected that while that was happening by monitoring all of their systems? And then finally, Knight Capital, a very topical one. This year, I think in September, Knight Capital had a trading algorithm that went mad. They didn't detect it. What we believe happened was they actually left a simulator baked into their trading algorithm, and it was placing trades out of the market. And they ended up losing $400 million and about the same from their market cap before they figured this out. And they couldn't even find where the algorithm was. So what the overarching requirement of all these is, if somebody needs to be able to spot patterns that are happening, either people manipulating the market, people making mistakes, rogue traders, algorithms gone wild, and stop it. And that's what we've done a lot of work in. If you can get ahead of that and stop something before it moves the market, you can protect your firm's reputation, regulators can protect the market, and so on. So imagine, this is the idea of big data in motion, spotting these patterns and being predictive. Imagine that you can spot an unusual trading activity. You're taking in market data, you're taking in trades from your traders, you're taking in news. You can spot some unusual trading activity just before a news article comes out that moves the market. Somebody who's never traded this before, they're doing 300 times their usual low. It could be luck, they could have had a good trade, but it could be insider trading. Now, that alone is just one signal. But imagine if you're putting together a pattern and you're seeing a trend emerging. You might notify the chief compliance officer, but you might also flag that this is a trend in our experience of our self-learning system. It's going to cause a big problem downstream, so let's get ahead of that and nip it in the bud. This is the way we need to move from the rearview mirror to being proactive and even predictive. The only way you can get all this data together is by plumbing it into the into the cloud and using new techniques of big data in motion, like complex event processing, real-time analytics, and so on. So imperative 8, let's move on to the last 3 imperatives, and these are really about time to market. High productivity, we have done a lot of work in that space as well, and we see companies that want to build applications want to get their apps in the market quickly, and they also, when they have to change them, want to change them rapidly. So model-driven tools like BPM integrated with application development pieces, and even in the cloud, are very popular, we find, plugging pieces together graphically and then easily enabling them to be changed. Now combine that with imperative 9, the desire to assemble pieces, not to build it. Gone are the days when people want to build everything from scratch and they see that as their competitive advantage. Their competitive advantage is their secret sauce, but if they can take what's out there and put it together in unique ways, that's a win because they get quick time to market. Now, rather than it being modules that you bring into your code, now all these services exist in the cloud. How can we spin up, provision something within those services and then bind it together? And if we can do that graphically using BPM-like model-driven techniques, all the better. So you can see how these things are coming together in people's thoughts. And then finally, oh, I've got an example of that actually. So imagine that you want to launch a loyalty program. Imagine you're Subway, or imagine if you're Franchise Technologies, the software supplier to Subway, and they want to launch a loyalty program for their customers. How could they do that using lots of things that are freely available or available at a charge out there in the cloud? So they might, for example, hook into Salesforce. They might have all their customer data in Salesforce, suck that in, and create a customized loyalty database. They might bring in social media so they can find out what people are saying about particular sandwiches in particular locations. And they might hook into SAP so they can find out from their ERP system sandwich consumption information in particular regions. They might pump all that into a Hadoop big data deployment, data warehouse, so that they can crunch all this data together, all in the cloud. Might connect to that a cloud-based visual analytics tool so you can look for graphical patterns in that data and find out, for example, that people in Boston seem to like tuna sandwiches, people in North Carolina seem to like barbecue, and so on. But then they might pump that into a predictive analytics in the cloud component, where you might be able to do even more analysis and predict patterns such as, well, it looks like people in certain regions in California are with a certain socioeconomic class. There might be an opportunity for a high-end lobster roll in some of our stores. That could be an untapped market that we could get into. And then you would even tap into real-time marketing systems where you can launch campaigns out to certain demographics that you've identified to promote your new lobster roll offering in California. All of these things are available out there in the cloud. It's just a question of how do you coordinate all this and bring it together? This is an application. I wrote very little of it. It's more, how do I actually coordinate it? So the final imperative is about community. We know that community is very important. It's not a technology requirement per se, it's about who else is building in this way, who else is building around this platform or this technique, what are the best practices that they've shared, what have they built, what artifacts have they built that we can use to help build our application. So people are choosing platforms, for example, in the cloud based on what the community is out there. So that's another very important requirement that I wanted to make sure it wasn't just all technology. So there's the 10 imperatives that we learn about. I'm sure you've got some of your own which you would throw in there, but there's 10 important things that are required. And remember, many of these need to converge in platforms of tomorrow. So now let's look about how we might go about enabling some of these things. So here's a vision for you. Imagine a modules marketplace in the cloud. And those modules represent wrappings via APIs of services analytics and back-end capabilities that are out there in the cloud which I can use to build my application. So some might be cloud data or cloud application services. I can connect to Salesforce and suck in my CRM data, put data back in there. I can connect to other databases in the cloud. I can connect to social media like Twitter and Facebook. Some might be analytics services. Rather than just getting that data in, pumping that through an analytics so I can get real-time global sentiment. I can track my location-based services so I can find out when Jamie enters the mall. Or I can get alerts when certain things happen. You know, you can imagine a variety of different analytics services out there. And others might be application back-end services, so database back-ends, mobile back-end as a service, user management, etc., etc. So imagine via my application development platform of choice, whether that be, you know, from Microsoft or Force or Progress or Google or Amazon or whoever, my APaaS, my PaaS environment, I can provision these modules and plug them together. I've now plugged in some modules. I can now measure social media sentiment. I can track users and send alerts when certain things happen. This is a location-aware alerting application which can also track social media sentiment. I think I might just package that up and sell that on a marketplace. So it's about quickly putting these things together. It's an interesting vision. I didn't write any of those modules, and in fact, they're not even running on my machine. They're running in other people's deployments in the cloud. I'm just orchestrating, assembling them. But I've created a new app. So how do we actually go about doing that? And this is what we're doing a lot of thinking about and planning. I think an important building block is something that was released yesterday by Progress. It's the DataDirect Cloud. So this comes from a lot of thinking about how can we wrap services which are already out there and allow people to easily plug them in and plug them together into their application. So DataDirect Cloud is all about you just have a single API, a single driver, if you like, in your application, and then you can go out to a cloud which is empowered to go out to all sorts of different data services, social media, databases, applications, and all sorts of services out there. So this is a way to wrap with a standard API any service or data out there, or even to enable people to create their own. And you can go out without having to put all that in your program and talk different APIs and different databases through a standard way. And that can, of course, be accessed through mobile or through a wide range of application development platforms. So that's the first building block that we've thought about. Something that we've also thought would be an important step, and this is something that we're planning, we're in the process of building right now, is a decision, we call it a decision analytics cloud. This is the concept of putting technologies like complex event processing that can do big data in motion, business rules so that you can make decisions on data into the cloud so that you can analyze big data in motion. You can do things like real-time alerting. You can do things like sentiment analysis, location and context-aware rules, and allow people to build custom analytics by feeding in those data items that are freely available in the cloud and then analyzing them. So that's another building block, and then even feeding that into visual analytics or notifications on mobile devices. So that's another interesting building block we thought to try and achieve this vision. Now the final piece, and this is where you say, I always knew it, this bloke's out of his gourd. This is my analogy. I'm going to call it the Jetpack paramedic. I'll explain that in a moment. But it's all about application genetic splicing. I believe that as applications move into the cloud, move mobile, there's a whole load of applications out there that are not yet in the cloud and are not mobile. And there's applications in our community that are not, but they want to move into the cloud and mobile because there's a different demographic that they're able to target them. And it's an important competitive advantage for them. As they move into the cloud, why not analyze that application and look for modules which could be part of a modules marketplace? So there, within those applications, there might be componentry where a partner or customer could create a new revenue stream by making those modules available in the cloud. Let me give you my mad example. So let's say you've recognized that a motorcycle paramedic is a really good way of getting to a crisis quickly, slipping through traffic, getting a highly trained person to the scene. But yet, they can't really get to war zones very easily, and they can't get to mountainsides, and they can't get to places where a motorcycle can't get through. An A-10 tank buster aircraft could get through any scenario, but it's not really ideal for medical emergencies. It's probably good at causing them, but not so good at getting to them. So imagine that we could componentize these systems into the turbofans that power it, the airframe, the paramedic, the motorcycle, the medication. Imagine that those components, just bear with me for a moment, were in the cloud, so they were elastically scalable and reconfigurable. Imagine that we said, okay, I'm going to take the turbofans and I'm going to scale them down. I'm going to take an airframe, scale that down. I'm going to take the paramedic and strap him on with his medical supplies. And I've created a completely new application here, the Jetpack paramedic. Now, this might be insane, but I wanted to have an interesting example to motivate it. Imagine if, obviously you can't do this, so please don't try. I know you wanted to try this, didn't you? I can tell. Please don't try this at home, but you can try it with your applications. If you've got a monolithic application that you're moving to the cloud or mobile, powering big data, social media, why not think about how you could divide that up into a set of modules which could be usable by others in a certain circumstance and get a different revenue stream from that? And that's the analogy. Yes, I am completely mad. So think about that marketplace, the concept of it. Data services, analytics services, application services for user and tenant management, even a marketplace, billing and metering, all things you need, and open those APIs up so that partners could build their own modules and create this module marketplace, which you can then expose through everyone else's app store in all those platforms as a service. I think this is a very interesting concept, and one that we're really investigating deeply and developing the first stages towards deployment of. And you heard that with our DataDirect Cloud. So the data piece has now been launched in beta form, and we're very interested in your feedback on this, both the vision and the first steps. So going back to those 10 imperatives, if you look at the journey we've come on in application development and deployment, we've moved from a world in which systems mostly run on premises to one where you have to build cloud first. A world in which applications are designed for desktop browsers to one where they should be designed mobile first. A world in which every user is the same to one in which the content is personalized based on location and context of individuals. A world in which users are alone on an island to a world in which they're socially connected. And a world in which applications designed for hundreds or thousands of users to one where we don't even know yet the scale of the biggest applications. But I think we could have applications in the billions within the next decade based on the uptake of smart devices and incoming devices like Google Glasses, which I'm very much looking forward to. Next time I meet you, I will be wearing my Google Glasses. We're moving from a world of processing megabytes of pretty uniform data to one of big data, but not just big data, but big data in motion, where many applications have got a limited time window to respond, and they have to find those patterns, those opportunities and threats, like my capital markets examples, and respond. A world in which we analyze historical results in the rearview mirror to one in which we're being proactive, even predictive. A world in which we do a lot of programming to one in which we combine that with high productivity, graphical BPM type models, model-driven development. A world in which we have monolithic applications to one where we assemble, don't build. And a world in which code is king to where community is king. So that's the 10 imperatives and my thoughts on assembling applications rather than building them. Very much welcome questions. I think we have a few minutes left. If anybody has any, as long as they're not about my sanity.
We absolutely have time because you have covered so much ground. There's a gentleman here, he's totally bewildered by these 10 concepts. Have at it, sir.
So while I like your idea about reusing modules, reality is that, you know, for that to work, you got to have a lot of uniform standard interfaces. And such is not the case, as you know. So what you're going to end up with is like a Franken app. And somebody was talking about starting from scratch rather than doing Franken apps. So I'd like to hear thoughts on that.
That's very interesting.
Second point is that in order to be predictive and not reactive, you actually have to have visibility into the cloud app, which is a thing that comes, you know, very seldom these days. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I like that term, Franken app. Well, it's definitely something we should aspire not to be. I agree with you, but I think it's, you know, I don't have all the answers. I think we're exploring an interesting concept here. So I agree with you. I know, you know, I welcome that comment that there's some warning signs that we don't want to create something that's, you know, just getting us into a completely new hole. However, I would say I think there are elegant ways in which we can do this wrapping, you know, with even the DataDirect team have made a great start with their taking the principle of, you know, talking to cloud services as if they're an SQL database or an ODBC service. But I think we can move to sort of having quite an elegant RESTful services model. And people have to connect to these services anyway. I mean, they are doing it already. I think we're more at risk of Franken apps right now with ad hoc ways of doing it. Wouldn't it be nice to have a standard way? So I like to think of it, you know, maybe more as, you know, a modularity that we can learn from. Rather, it might start as Franken apps. We might have our Frankenstein, you know, learning experience where, you know, we take the head of Jamie Merritt and put it on the body of Bill Wood. That would be quite, and the other way around, in fact. That would be quite interesting. But yeah, so I think that's something we're going to have to go through, but I think it's just my view, and I think the goal is a good one. And the second part, you mentioned about visibility. I agree. I think applications, it's a very good point, they're not just about data processing. Now, there were, you know, you had your transaction processing applications, you had your analytic applications. I think there's a convergence happened there as well, which is a very good point, which could arguably be another imperative. The fact that apps have to be able, many apps are seeing how other apps are running, but also how they're running themselves. So I don't know if that if you had a specific point about the visibility, but I completely agree with that. I think the big data in motion needs to be used for things like cloud visibility as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to plug my company, App Dynamics.
Brilliant.
It gives you visibility into your app.
App Dynamics, they're great.
Opportunism is a wonderful thing. Any more for any more? You see, you have completely riveted them with way too many concepts. So look, that is what I call a keynote. Hands up if you think that was a real keynote. Yeah. Really, really, really high energy, marvelous stuff. Thank you so much. John Bates, Progress Software, DataDirect. Let's give him one more round of applause. He really did his homework. Thank you, audience.